Welcome to Whisperwood Stories. A small announcement before we begin. Next week, for Halloween, I'll be posting the story that I've promised. I'll be narrating it, but it will be up for reading on my Reddit account. But anyways, we're getting so close to Halloween. So sit back and enjoy the 3 stories from r/creepyencounters that I have for you today. Let's begin. Our first story is from Kyltira. Footsteps outside my window. My bedroom is the hottest room in the entire house. In the winter, I have to almost fully cover the vent to block heat from coming in, and I have to sleep with the window open a tiny bit to keep it from getting too hot. I have medical issues that cause me to get violently ill if I get overheated. When it's fall, I generally keep the bedroom windows open. They have screens on them, and I have blinds and blackout curtains, and sleep with them open. I have a window at the front of the house and a window on the side of the house in my room. The other night, I was watching TV because I have horrible insomnia and just couldn't fall asleep. Sometime after midnight, I heard footsteps outside my window on the side of the house. There's leaves all over the ground already, so it was pretty loud. I paused my show and listened. Honestly, just figured it was one of my roommate's dogs. I realized, unfortunately, that there was no way it was either of his dogs. The girl dog is much younger, maybe a year old, and she prances everywhere. It's pretty adorable and very distinctive, since I hear her out there several times a day. His other dog is a large dog, but he's very old, very fat, and slow-moving. He generally can't even walk the distance from the back door to the other side of the house near my window. His walk is also very distinctive, because he hardly lifts any of his paws. He's seriously super old when he walks. I also noticed that it was very clearly the steps of someone walking on 2 feet. Within seconds of me pausing the TV, the steps completely stopped. I listened for a while, but eventually turned the show back on. We do have a tree between us, by my window, and our neighbor. It's completely plausible that if someone was outside the window, they could have climbed into the tree and waited until they could get away without being heard. Eventually, I fell asleep. Just a little while ago, I had dozed off watching TV only to be woken up by my cat frantically jumping on my head to look out the side window. He never looks out that window when I'm asleep, because he can't find a way to the window without stepping on me and waking me up. His tail was very puffed out, and the hairs on his back were slightly raised. I've rarely seen him do this. He has only acted like that one time towards an animal, and that was a cat we brought into the room and allowed to eat his food. He looks out the open windows all the time. He loves seeing other animals. This took me from scared to absolutely freaked out. I paused the show, and again, it was unmistakably human steps outside my window again. Only, this time, they didn't stop when I paused the TV, and they definitely weren't trying to be quiet. I heard them take several quick steps, and the sound faded towards the front of the house. Confirmed when my cat launched himself across the room to look out that window. I called the police, and 2 searched the outside of the house with flashlights, and another car drove around shining their spotlight around the neighborhood. Here's hoping whoever this is doesn't keep coming back. I'm gonna get some cameras as soon as I can to put outside my windows, so that I can find out who this is and have them stopped. Our second story is from Technical Depth. The Man in the Closet. This is a story that I've told to very few people because I knew no one would believe me. When I was 6 years old, my mother worked as a cleaning lady for a dying old woman who was a bit scary. She had hired 2 cleaning women, so my mother worked with another woman who also had a son. I got along relatively well with this other child. However, he was sometimes quite strange. In fact, the old woman really didn't like children, and I remember her asking us to be good, otherwise she would call a monster. This monster was obviously a simple model in her balcony, but the other child seemed completely terrified, and I remember that I spent a lot of time winnowing and calling him a sissy. He told me weird stories, like the appearance of a monster at night. They were classic kid stories. It was then that one day, the dying old woman told our mothers that she no longer wanted us to come back because we were rather turbulent. My mother was initially annoyed, but decided instead to call on the son of a friend of hers who was unemployed to look after us. This is where the strange stories began. This guy who watched us was called Kareem. He was between 18 and 20, but I remember him as a guy who traumatized me. His goal was clearly to scare us. However, he didn't do it the classic way. In fact, he was doing terrifying things that even today I couldn't explain. First of all, he often told us about a dog, which he said was very naughty. I remember that the other child wanted to see it at all costs, so one day, after our mothers left, leaving us in the care of Kareem, he asked us to go to the kitchen. I remember being very hesitant to follow them. They called me a coward, and I ended up following them. That's when he opened the fridge. However, we were in a blind spot, so as not to see the inside. I heard a very strange noise, like something eating. Then he took out his bloody hands. Today, I think it's perfectly explainable. It was just a bad joke. As a kid, I was just gullible. So Kareem was that kind of person. And when I told my mother all of this, she seemed to ignore it all. It was then that one evening, my mother invited the mother of the other child and Kareem to my house. That night, I had planned with the other child not to sleep, so we decided to disturb our mothers and Kareem. We made a noise. We fired projectiles with toy guns, and that's where I saw him. A super tall man came from the corridor and looked at us in our room. We shouted, and the man did too, and he ran and disappeared. My mother heard us and had come to reassure us. We ended up sleeping in my mother's room. There was a closet in the hallway, and I don't know why, but I had always linked this closet to this strange man. Anyway, even today, I don't really know what happened, but it was surely a joke by Kareem. But how was it possible? Kareem was in the living room with our mothers, and above all, only me and the other child had seen this thing. I dare not especially tell this story in general. It seems too far-fetched and false, however, I know very well what I saw. It wasn't a dream or anything, it was real, since I had seen the same thing with the boy, and my mother had reassured me that night. Our last story is from the Divisionbella. Disembodied voice on Teams meeting. Has this happened to anyone? I'm hoping there's a technical explanation, but here goes. I manage a small team of 4 people. 3 of them were working in the office with me one day while the 4th was working from home. Let's call her Lisa. There was nobody else in the office, so we were the only people on site. We held a team meeting in the conference room and connected with Lisa on Microsoft Teams so she'd be included. My laptop was plugged into a large TV monitor so I could share my screen and audio. Towards the end of the meeting, I asked if anyone had any questions. There was silence in the conference room and silence on Teams. Amidst the silence, we hear a faint voice say, "I don't understand." It sounded like a small child fussing. All eyes in the conference room darted around, although it was clear the sound came from the TV. Lisa has a 5-year-old daughter, so I laughed and said, "Hey Liz, is your daughter trying to join the meeting?" To our surprise, she goes, "My daughter isn't at home. She's at school." Stunned, all of us in the conference room exchange glances. Lisa then says, "Wait, that voice didn't come from the conference room?" I explained that the 4 of us were the only ones in the office, and that Lisa was the only one on the team session. We all agreed on the phrase we heard, and that it sounded like a young, cranky child. Lisa was home alone, and the rest of us were alone in the office, and nobody had other devices out during the meeting that would explain the voice. There were no other programs open on mine or Lisa's laptops during the meeting. We were all sober, alert, and oriented. Has anyone else experienced a disembodied voice on a web conference? Maybe hacking or signal interference is to blame? Either way, it was creepy as hell to hear in the middle of a workday. Thank you for listening to Whisperwood Stories. If you enjoyed, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe down below. Do you have a story that you'd like me to read here? Consider commenting or sending it to whisperwoodsubmissions@gmail.com. The stories in this video were read with the author's permissions. Want to support me? Consider checking out the PayPal link below where you can donate. Remember to tune in next week for the new story that I've written for you. Thank you again for listening, and be sure to check out the original Reddit posts. Don't let the shadows get too close.